Believe me, never had a lot of shit come easy. Had to work hard, struggle just to be me. Had to and what was left over I put towards my dreaming. But the only thing in life that has meaning are the things you gotta work for, believe me. Take into your hands a plan, your own hands can land your own brand. And damn, I feel like no one takes accountability. They want the credibility, convincingly unwilling to put in the hours it takes to get some power. Don't be f***ing sour, take a cold shower, scream until you're louder, work until you're prouder, and f*** all the doubters, they're just your downers. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought.
I can tell you that 7 years after Freddie Gray, that was 2015, spring, April, May. This is 2022. Communities like Sandtown, all we saw then and now in terms of investment was a renovated Western District Police Station and a new funeral home. That's what West Baltimore got. A new police station and a new funeral home. What kind of optics are they? Was Freddie Gray any different than 1968 Baltimore riots? Dr. King's passing, killing, murder? This is the same?
No, it wasn't. I mean, I think, well, first of all, people who are being violent and burning, that's, all that's the same. But the point is what was the cause and what were they attempting to register?
I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns.
I love you.
They deserve an ounce. It's
got next. And on me for.
It's only worth it if you work for it. I won't stop till they hear me now. I won't stop till I wear the crown. I swear to God they all let me down. I always fought just to wear the crown. I'm off at these fucking clowns.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover, entered to win it for the long haul, baby. Okay, so I got a picture up, and that picture is of the one and only Alice Torriente, who is joining us this morning. Good morning, Miss Alice. How are you?
Good morning, Mr. Glover. I'm fine. How are you?
Blessed by the best. Now, we got your picture up on the screen, so we're going to get on with the get down. For those who do not know, Miss Alice Torriente is an educator. She is a political pundit. She is a world traveler. And she is also the daughter of the first state senator that I ever knew. His name was Senator Troy Brailey. Good morning.
Good morning again.
So how does it feel to be the daughter of greatness?
My dad was the person who cared about the little people. And so I'm just happy to be his daughter and to know of the good things that he did.
Mm-hmm. So how'd you become an educator? Let's start with that.
I always enjoyed working with young children at my church, in the neighborhood. My next door neighbors used to come over to my mother's house on Baker Street, and I would help them do their homework on top of my mother's freezer in the kitchen. So that was something that I always sort of had in mind that I wanted to do. And fortunately enough, I was able to go to Coppin, get my undergraduate degree, got a wonderful education there. And later on, I went to New York University to get an advanced degree. So that had been something that had always been in my DNA, I guess, that I wanted to pursue.
Now, you're a Baltimorean, but you a principal in the Bronx.
Yes. What had happened was I met a Latin from Manhattan, my husband, and got married and moved to New York, and that's how I happened to continue my career.
Hold up, Miss Alice. Hold up. You just threw your first fastball. A Latin in Manhattan.
Right.
Wow. And obviously his last name is Torriente.
Correct.
Oh, wow. Okay.
What had happened was I had one of my favorite aunts lived in New York, and so as a teacher in Baltimore, we didn't get paid during the summer, and I didn't have sense enough to have my salary divided into 12 months.
Because you wanted all your money now. You don't trust them. Give me my money
No.
now.
Well, what happened was, when you're a young teacher, you got credit card bills, you have a car payment, and all this other stuff. So I had no income in the summer. And so I got a job working in New York, and I stayed with my favorite Aunt Alice. I was named after that aunt. And so during the time I was there, I went to a party, and that's where I met my husband, my future husband. Told him how much I liked his last name, never dreaming that I'd marry him. I should say my late husband. He's deceased now. He's been deceased for quite a while.
So you're also a world traveler.
Well, I do enjoy traveling, particularly looking at places where slavery took place. And so I have done that, and I've also, as chairman of the Baltimore City Women for Obama, we did go to Norway, which had nothing to do with slavery. But we were there when he got the Nobel Peace Prize, which was one of the highlights of my life.
Had you ever been to Oslo before?
Had never been to Oslo before, had never been on my radar screen. But only because of Obama and all the hard work that we had done to get him elected. But my other travels were primarily in Caribbean and African countries.
What African countries have you been to?
Ghana, South Africa. Well, Brazil is not a African country.
Might as well be. Got 100 million black people there.
Well, of course, the thing is, the majority of the people who came from Africa went to Brazil. And so, London had a lot of African activity going there. So, those were the places that I went to thus far.
Okay. So let's shift gears a bit. Who was Tom Saunders to you?
Tom Saunders was my business partner, my dear departed late business partner. When I came to Baltimore, because of my interest in African American history.
When you came back to Baltimore?
Yes. After I retired, I moved back to Baltimore. Tom and I linked up because of my interest in Black history, and I became a partner with his company, Renaissance Productions. I later started my own company, African American Cultural Tours and Travel. Tom's company did just primarily local tours, but my company did local, national, and international tours.
Wow. Now, Tom was a historian. Are you a historian?
Kind of, sort of.
You are definitely a historian. Tell me about your trip to the Gullah Islands.
Oh, okay. Well, what happened was my late mother, Jessie Brailey, my late brother, Norman Brailey, and I went down to the Gullah Festival. And it was outstanding. We had an opportunity to tour, not only to go to the Gullah Festival, where we ran into more people from New York than I would ever have expected. We went to the Gullah Festival, and we toured the schools. We toured all the areas there. And what I found interesting was the fact that many of the foods and some of the basket weaving that we saw in Jamaica and the West Indies were some of the same things that they were doing in the Gullah Islands. So it was extremely interesting, and I couldn't believe the people that I ran into that we already knew. Ran into my son's baseball coach from New York down at the Gullah Festival. So it was absolutely a wonderful experience. And then, of course, some of the people who were vendors at the Gullah Festival came to Baltimore and were vendors at the Baltimore Fair that we had.
So let me just slide this in there, that while a lot of Americans, as of late, acknowledged the year 1619 as the year that Black people first came to the Americas, they are wrong.
Absolutely.
Let me finish. In my book, and I'm showing a copy of my book, I Am Black Wall Street, 1619 is much too late. Our sources suggest that, number one, the first Blacks that came to America were not slaves. One of them was Juan Garrido, who was a Spanish conquistador. Also, around 1525, our research shows, and you can pick up a copy of I Am Black Wall Street, ordered on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. But the first Blacks that were there on the coast of in South Carolina, they beat up the slaver, and they escaped to the Gullah Islands. Well, let me ask you, what is your understanding of the Gullah Islands? How did those Black people get there? I'm saying 1525.
My understanding, and it may not be as well founded as yours, is that a number of those people came from they were Muslims, and they came there before that time. That was my understanding, but mine is not as deep and as researched as yours.
Well, let me just add that the year Columbus is given is 1492. That's when, and he did not discover anything. He found people. That's when it became apparent to Columbus and those who live in his neck of the woods. But people so you can't discover something where people already live. But that aside, a lot of people don't know that the Moors were already traveling the waterways. So when the Moors got kicked out of Spain, those Spanish, all they did was pick up and start following the same paths that the Moors had already been traveling. But we're never taught that in American history. Why are we so robbed of our history, Miss Alice?
They don't want us to know that we have come from kings and queens, and we have reached greatness. It's all about keeping us down and making us not think well of ourselves and our history.
Miss Alice, what do you think of Wes Moore?
I think Wes Moore is a very capable person whom I believe would be a wonderful governor for the state of Maryland. I must tell you that I have worked in the campaign, so I would probably be a little prejudiced.
Well, I would be prejudiced if you came on here talking about Cox.
So I have worked with Wes and his wonderful wife and the members of the campaign, and I think that he would certainly be a great attribute to us in the state of Maryland, aside from making history as the first African-American governor for the state of Maryland.
Oh, hold up. Wait a minute. Are you like just getting on board?
No, I've been there since day one.
Oh, so you're not a Johnny come lately, because some people lost. And then they got to buy all of these tickets to these expensive fundraisers to kind of get their name off of the list. It ain't the good list.
No, not at all. Not at all. I've been there since the very, very beginning.
So you know Dawn Moore. You've worked with her.
Yes, I have. And she's a lovely lady. Will make a wonderful first lady for us here in the state of Maryland.
Miss Alice, the word is, I heard you was driving the car. You was trying to you were.
No, I had a bout of illness a little earlier, and Dawn and Wes were calling me, asking me what they could do for me. And my response to them was just pray for me that I will get better. And in fact, they did. So we're in constant communication.
So tell me about growing up in your parents' household. I understand that A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King Jr., Jackie Robinson, I heard your house was like the Great Blacks and Wax.
Well, I wouldn't quite say that, but yes, we did. A. Philip Randolph was just about like a grandfather to me. He, Bayard Rustin, and Mr. B.F. McLaurin. What happened was,
Oh, who is that? I don't know that one.
B.F. McLaurin was sort of like the hatchet man for. I'll tell you a little bit about him a little later. My dad became a Pullman porter in 1940.
Senator Troy Brailey was a Pullman porter, 40th district.
The 40th district was a. Well, let me just go back.
I'll shut up. I'll shut up.
My dad was from Lynchburg, South Carolina, country boy. His mother was an educator. His mother had gone to, was from New Orleans, and she had gone to a convent school. After she finished the convent school, her mother sent her up to Voorhees College in South Carolina. My grandmother stayed in South Carolina as a teacher and met my father's father, who was a handsome devil, but a farmer. And my father came from a family of 6 children. His father wanted him to be a farmer. My father said, I'm not having that. So he hitchhiked his way to Baltimore. When he hitchhiked his way to Baltimore, he stayed with his cousin that lived on Fulton Avenue at the time. And well, I don't know if he was on Fulton Avenue at the time, but they ultimately moved to Fulton Avenue. But my father had a job, got his first job as a shoe shine boy down in South Baltimore on Charles Street.
Now, see, this is where you're about to do some real educating.
Okay, and the thing is, during that time, I don't know how many old timers are listening, but later Judge, the man who became a judge, Solomon Liss, was on the other side of the street selling newspapers. So they were fast friends from way back in the day. All right, after my father was a shoe shine boy, he got a job in a tailor shop. Later, as a presser, he became a waiter in Rossiter's restaurant. Rossiter's is now a parking lot, but it was a world famous seafood restaurant on right around the corner from Chauffeurs. Judy Garland and all the famous folks used to come to Rossiter's.
Was this on Charles Street?
Below the block below Charles Street.
Right, block below Charles.
Diagonally across the street from Chauffeurs. I can't recall.
Oh, okay. Right now. So Chauffeurs is the furniture store.
Chauffeurs was the furniture store. They've gone out of business. Diagonally across the street below, it's right where the drugstore is. Right below where the drugstore is, across the street from Chauffeurs.
Okay.
But anyway, that's where my father was a waiter. Okay. My mother and her sister, she came from a family of 10.
Senator Brailey was a waiter.
He was a waiter prior to becoming a Pullman porter. What happened was my mother lived up the street from Rossiter's. And in order for my father to get transportation to go home, he would have to pass my mother's house. She and her sisters would be out on the steps. He met my mother, Jessie Granger, and they got married, later from there. Okay, I was born in my grandmother's house at 122 Hamburg Street. Shortly after.
So you South Baltimore.
I am South Baltimore, and back in South Baltimore, born, South Baltimore bred, and back in South Baltimore again.
After living all over the world.
Back in South Baltimore.
And what's the name of that church down there?
Leadenhall Baptist Church, over 150 years old, has been in the same place the whole time. That's our church. We've had three generations who are members of that church. And I'm still a member of Leadenhall Baptist Church.
I remember you sending me some flyers during the height of the pandemic saying they got food down. And that's when I learned more about your South Baltimore history. Okay, so come on, tell me some more.
All right. Well, after I was born, a couple years later, my mother had my brother. So there we moved to the McCullough Projects. McCullough projects were just being built. They were just putting the bushes in the ground when we moved. We were among the first to move there. However, projects at that time were for people to get on their feet to move on, not to be there forever.
Oh, my daddy said the same thing. Can you repeat that? And this is with all due respect to the brothers and sisters that come out of Murphy Homes, Lexington Terrace, Flag House, and Lafayette. Say it one more time. I want y'all to hear this.
The projects were there so that people could get on their feet and to move on. It was not there for you to stay forever.
Cop and bop.
And so anyway, we lived in the McCullough projects for a bit. My dad got the job working as a Pullman porter on the train. And I was fortunate enough, I guess I'm such a pack rat, I was fortunate enough to find my father's identification card from 1940 when he joined the Pullman Porters. And so as a result of joining the Pullman Porters, he got to know A. Philip Randolph. And A. Philip Randolph, we moved out of the projects and moved on Baker Street. Well, A. Philip Randolph, B.F. McLaurin, and my goodness, I'm having a single moment. The one who was the nonviolent
Rustin, Bayard Rustin.
Rustin used to come to our house and talk. And of course, during the time that they were planning the March on Washington, were many of the times that they would come to the house. My dad, because of his involvement with Randolph, was asked to be the chair of the Baltimore group that was coming to the March on Washington in 1963. Now, some other folks have put out the word that their dad was the chairman. He was not. He was one of the coordinators of the March on Washington. I have a lot of material here from the March on Washington, the officers, the plans. I have all of that information. I'll get to that later. Anyway, my dad was the chairman for the folks, for getting the people in the buses together from Baltimore to go to the March on Washington. During the time that they were planning the March on Washington, Mr. Randolph, who, according to the FBI, was the most dangerous Negro in America, had a fundraiser at the Apollo Theater. And they were raising money to help to support the March on Washington.
Who was the most dangerous black man?
That's what A. Philip Randolph was called by the person who was in charge of the FBI at the time.
J. Edgar Hoover?
J. Edgar Hoover, right, J. Edgar Hoover.
It wasn't J. Edgar Hoover black?
Yes, he was, but he dared people to tell him, yes, he was.
He's one of them kind of black people, ashamed of his blackness.
Right.
Until he need black people, then he all over here and stuff, all up in the chitlins and the hog maws, drinking up all the Kool-Aid, stealing all the sugar. Okay, I'm sorry, I digress.
I don't know if he ever admitted to being black, but he certainly was. Black people in his family finally wrote a book and talked about his blackness. However, they had to fundraise.
Shameful. Shame of his own people.
Mr. Randolph trusted my father to the degree that he put him in the box office to collect the money that they were raising for the March on Washington.
Stop right there. How many of these politicians today can you trust with that money? Because these people going to jail for $15,000 and $20,000.
I cannot speak.
See, we might not be free if we had these black people today in charge. Thank God Harriet Tubman had her own money. I know, I digress.
All right, but
they trusted your daddy with the money. And for those that don't know, her daddy, the recreation center that we revere as Easterwood, for the record, is now Senator Troy Brailey Easterwood Park and Recreation Center. And we love that. My mama took me by the hand around the corner to meet your daddy back in 1983. I'll never forget the moment. One of my last memories, my mom walked me by hand to your house, up them steps. And I thought my mama was crazy at that juncture. And she said, we're going to get you a scholarship. And lo and behold, I got my first state senatorial scholarship. Thank you, Senator Brailey.
That is so wonderful. We're so glad he was able to do that for you and so many others. But back to my story.
Hey, Nina. Nina's tuning in. She from Moreland Avenue, too. But it's Moreland and Baker in the house. It's the Moreland Baker takeover.
All right. Anyway, he was able to work with Mr. Randolph, and he got the buses from Baltimore to come to D.C. And what had happened was, in organizing the buses to come to D.C., he had the second highest number of buses to New York. New York had the greatest number of buses. Baltimore had the second highest number of buses. So as a result of that, Mr. Randolph said to him, "You know what, Brailey, why don't you run for office? If you run for office, I'll come to Baltimore and I will do a fundraiser for
Listen,
you."
I can't let you gloss over that. Your daddy, because of his organizing skills, organized behind New York, which currently has the largest number of black people in America, 2 million. You saying your daddy organized the second largest amount of people, and that group was from Baltimore.
That is correct.
And Baltimore, just for the record, you could call a home of the civil rights movement, couldn't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm glad we now got that clear. Baltimore is one of the homes of the civil rights movement. No disrespect to Atlanta, to DC, to New York, but Baltimore holds its own.
Anyway, Mr. Randolph kept his word, and he had the fundraiser for my father. My father ran for the House of Delegates, and he won on his first time around. He was a member of the old 4th District Democratic Club, which when we had Senator Verda Welcome, and they used to meet over top of the Met Theater.
Pennsylvania North.
North, that's right, Pennsylvania North. That was where the Met Theater was, and that was where the 4th District Democratic Club met.
My daddy took me to see Cornbread Earl and me up there.
All right.
And they got a Jewish cemetery up there, too.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, my dad, during the time that he was a delegate, got a lot of bills passed to help the little people. He was called himself the man of the little people. He passed a bill to have the transit fare half price for senior citizens. He passed a bill. This is just off the top of my head now. He passed a bill that made sure that they didn't have a whole lot of fat in the hamburger they were selling at Lafayette Market, which is now the Avenue Market. But one of the hallmarks of the things that he did was the fact that he had heard from his constituents that a number of the blacks that he had helped to get into positions of responsibility were not treating other blacks with consideration and respect.
Oh, they still around. Their children around now. Say it again. He was leaning on black people who got in position and forgot
where they came from. And so,
oh my God, the new Negroes.
What he did was he put on old clothes, and he went to the Social Security building. He went to the welfare office. He went to the places where these new blacks had these positions.
Oh, wow.
Instead of them looking at his face, they looked at what he had on. So he got the same kind of treatment that the people, his constituents, were complaining about. So of course he blasted them, and he got worldwide coverage for that kind of the kind of thing that he did.
I wish we would get some elected officials that dress down and go into child support, the welfare office, and anywhere else that services people. You know, Miss Alice, this country has put out the perception, for instance, that all black people on welfare, like white people not on welfare.
But the majority of people on welfare are white.
I
but
know.
A lot of people are not aware of that, and my father took great pains to make people know that. Okay, aside from that, my father was one of the founding members of the Maryland Black Caucus here in Maryland. And what had happened was my father quit the Black Caucus because he said that they had lost their way. And that was big news.
He started it and then he quit it.
He was among the members, among those who started, and he quit it and went to got in the press. And I was reading some old articles about it, stating that they had lost their way because they were making some deals that were not beneficial to the Black community. And so
why does that happen? We get in position. Hey, I want you to vote for me. I'm going to be big on education, big on making the streets safer. We're gonna get get the seniors what they need. Then a cat get in there, and then they don't want to leave. Now I'm not necessarily for this term limit thing as sponsored by the Atlas Group and Fox 45, but I will say this off the record. Black people, your job ain't to get in there and stay in that damn seat for 30, 40 years. Pass the damn ball and let somebody else shoot.
Well, aside from passing the ball, you got to prepare people to be ready to assume those positions.
Well, they ain't preparing nobody because they busy throwing in self-retirement parties every damn year.
Well,
I said it.
Well, anyway, ultimately they were able to make whatever it was whatever they needed to do. So he was able to join the Black Caucus again. But he was a very loyal member to the 4th District Democratic Club.
Were they loyal to him? Because my understanding is some of the black leaders in this town turned their back on him, tried to stab him in the back.
Oh yeah. One or two of them did, whose name I will not name, but they were people who had helped. He had helped when they came to Annapolis after him.
You want me to name them?
No, don't. But anyway, he had helped them, and then they turned their back on him. But anyway, we'll be that as and let them rest in peace because they're no longer with us.
They ain't got no damn peace. They ain't gonna have no peace in heaven even. You know what? I heard somebody say, if they sell you out in Africa, they'll sell you out in America too. They wasn't no good in Africa. They ain't gonna be no good in America either.
Well, what can I tell you? However, all during the time that my dad was there getting the bills passed, and I can't remember all of them. I know there were a number of things, the bills that he had passed for the state workers of Maryland, some of the hearing things, and some of the things to get raises for the state workers, and some of the things that would allow them to have disciplinary hearings that they were not allowed to have before. I had a chance to talk to some of the people who were aided by some of the bills that he passed. All right, Senator Verda Welcome had said that when she decided to retire, that my dad would be the person who would take her place. And so she decided to retire. And my dad geared up to run for her position. There was another female politician in the club who shall remain unnamed, who persuaded her, even though she had said she was going to retire, that she should run and not retire. So even after my father had made his announcement and said that he was going to run for her position, Senator Welcome decided that she was going to run again. So that was a matchup, and there was a lot of talk about the falling out in the 4th district and this and that. And
hold up, 1 minute she wasn't going to run, and then the next minute she decided to run.
Yes,
after he'd already gone out there. So she pulled an okie doke move on him.
Well, this other lady, I guess, talked her into it, the other female elected official. And so he ran, and of course he was able to defeat her. And so he became the state senator for the 40th district.
So since we can't say who went against your daddy, who did support your daddy? Who stayed true to your daddy? Well, damn.
Not a lot of folks.
Damn, that many?
I'm telling you.
See, that's what happens when you have character. That's what happens when you stand for something.
Not even some of the people who were on his ticket. some of them did him in.
That's why we named the park after Senator Brailey, because we knew his heart and we knew the rest of them clowns were only about their self.
Well, some of these people were people who were on his ticket because
betrayal comes from someone close.
Right. After he got to be senator, they put up one of the people on his ticket put up somebody else on his ticket to run against him and defeat him.
And these are black people?
Black people. And so my dad served in Annapolis with honor.
So Westmore ain't the first black man to get haters in Maryland.
And definitely not. Definitely not. So my dad served with honor for 27 years in Annapolis. And so it was just really interesting how things, played out and what the story was.
Well, that's a real, who is the famous baseball player that came to your house? And this was on McKean. Y'all lived on McKean Avenue?
No, Baker Street. No, we lived on Baker Street. Now, do you know where you came to get the scholarship? So you didn't come to McKean Avenue.
Did you used to live on McKean?
Never, ever. When we moved out of the McCullough Projects, we moved on Baker Street, the 2400 block. My dad was a great sports enthusiast, and my late brother as well. So Jackie Robinson came to our house. Willie Mays came to our house.
Willie Mays came to Baker Street?
Willie Mays came to Baker Street. E.D. Nixon, a lot of people don't know who E.D. Nixon was. E.D. Nixon was a former Pullman porter who was the one who was responsible for Martin Luther King being selected to be a part of to be a head of the Montgomery Improvement Association. I have pictures of E.D. Nixon, R.C. Davis, and my dad at my house. And so there were lots of people in and out of the house.
I hope y'all taking notes because I just learned something new. You said E.D. as in David Nixon?
E.D. Nixon, yes, E.D. Nixon.
Now, I knew about Vernon Johns, but E.D. Nixon.
E.D. Nixon lived in Montgomery, and he selected Martin Luther King was a new minister to Montgomery at that time. So E.D. Nixon set up the meeting so that Martin Luther King would be nominated to be second, and they would vote him in as chairman of Montgomery Improvement Association. And the word that I got was the reason that they wanted Martin Luther King because he was new, he was young, he was talented, and they didn't have any dirt on him. And so that was why E.D. Nixon was the one who set that up so that he would become the head of the Montgomery Improvement Association. What a lot of people don't know is that E.D. Nixon raised a lot of the money for the Montgomery bus boycott. And what he did was he had the money put in northern banks so that they couldn't fool with the money when he got ready to take it out. And so once they got ready to do the Montgomery boycott, E.D. Nixon came north, got the money, brought it back in shopping bags and paper bags, and had the money so he could buy the gas for the people who were, riding the people to work so that they wouldn't ride the buses for the Montgomery bus boycott. So they were friends, and they were at our house, and there were just a whole bunch of people were in and out of the house. In fact, my dad was one of the ones who helped to organize the Vulcan Blazers, the Black Firemen's Group. When the Black Firemen got hired here in Baltimore City, they called Pure Hell. And so Mr. Thomas, and I'm not remembering his first name, Warburg Ray, used to come to our house, and my dad helped him to organize the first Black Firemen's Union, which is now called the Vulcan Blazers. And so he was involved. He had his hands in a lot of things. He was very much a labor-oriented person. In fact, he was labor's candidate in Annapolis. They can all tell you about the many things that he did to support the working people, the little people.
So I gotta share this tidbit of history with you. When you mention labor, the Pullman porters, A. Philip Randolph, I'm reminded of how Isaac Myers,
Absolutely.
over in East Baltimore on the shipyard, and he created the Ship Caulkers Union for black laborers, of which he was the first president, of which Frederick Douglass was the second president. And my understanding is that was the beginning of the Black Labor Union.
Absolutely. That was the first black labor union. That's over by the Frederick Douglass Isaac Myers Museum was where that took where Isaac Myers had his had the shipyard.
All of this history right here in Baltimore. Is there any law saying that every Marylander has to know this black history before they get a Maryland State diploma?
Not to my knowledge. As a teacher here, I taught in Baltimore for 7 years before I went to New York. So during my time, I tried to include as much black history with my students as possible. I want to tell you a real joke. When I was still teaching here, when George Wallace ran for president of the United States.
Bull Wallace.
Right. And so I was a 5th grade teacher at the time. So I went down to the hotel where George Wallace had his headquarters. And they looked at me like I was crazy because I was the only black person in there. So I went in there to get some literature so I could take it back to my 5th grade students to tell them about George Wallace and what was going on.
This is like somebody visiting the Trump White House.
That's right. So I got the literature and I left. Later that evening, they had on the news about George Wallace being at this hotel and about there being an overflow crowd. Well, the place was like a room, and if you had 25 people in there, it would be an overflow crowd.
But clearly it was a mischaracterization to make him seem popular.
Absolutely, but I had been there, so I'd laughed to myself, and I was able to share with my students the literature that I brought back and what I saw and what was on television.
You told your kids there was nobody there.
That's right. There were very few. There were if there were 25 people, there were a lot, and I don't think there were 25. But that was the kind of thing that I was trying to bring to my students to make them aware of what was going on in the city.
What is the role of the black media in the political story of us here in Baltimore?
The black media has a very important role to play, and I'm so glad that you had the opportunity to be invited to the White House to meet with the media folks, the black lady who's in charge of the
press secretary.
Yeah, the president's press secretary, because I think they're finally realizing that we are important. However,
no, they always knew that. They're finally
acknowledging it.
Yes.
But it also depends on where they spend their money. Because I was looking at something on television where they said they gave the money to this white firm. The white firm held on to it and kept it among the white media and didn't give the black media any of the money to spend or to do anything.
Yeah, that's what they do.
So that has been the problem.
But you know, we are innovative, creative. We expect all of that foolishness. Sometimes we can get some of the money, sometimes we can't. I will tell you that the good Lord keeps this ship going. Because the money comes. And here's a reminder to anybody out there. If God gives you the vision, he will give you the provision. I'll say it again. If God gave you the vision, he will give you the provision.
Well, I tell you, but that's what we very much need to be doing. And so anyway, that is what the story is. But that's the story. That's my story. And so Dad lived a wonderful life, and he was respected, and people still remember him. Some of the old timers who were around, and some who were beneficiaries of the kinds of things that he did to help out people.
Well, let me tell you what he did to help out people. He stayed on Baker Street.
That's true.
When I think back, the first thing a black politician wants to do is leave Baker Street. But white people are buying up properties on places like Baker Street. What is up with us where first everybody wanted to move to the county? So black people been going out Liberty Road for 50 years. But white people from DC and New York are buying properties here on Carlton Avenue. Absolutely. What is it that the white people see in the black community, or at least where black people live, because a lot of us don't own jack? I mean, how do we change our thinking? Because every time we go somewhere, like we running out to Randallstown, Owens Mills, paying $300,000 for a prefabbed house. I met a cat who lived in the county and moved down on Druid Hill Avenue and bought himself a 3-story house, and it looks like a mansion. Wow. What is it about us that we seem to be never satisfied? I mean, when you first mentioned Fulton Avenue and your daddy, I wanted to ask you, I thought we couldn't live west of Fulton Avenue. It took a while for us to get there, but we got there. I knew quite a few folks who lived on Fulton Avenue. I know that Mr. Buster, who owned the Clico Club, the Odyssey. Like, from South Carolina, like my father. Hold up. Was he a black man? Black man. And he was among the first to move on Fulton Avenue. I'm trying to think of the other man who was the piano player. He played in all the white clubs. Oh, it's Cassell's, Mr. Cassell's. Can't think of his first name. He was among the early people who lived on Fulton Avenue. And so they were surrounded by white people, though. They were when they moved on Fulton Avenue. That is very, very true. But the white folks soon got on their horses and got out of those neighborhoods. But that was when I was a little girl back in the day. And talking about people moving up and moving out, when Willie Adams and Victorine Adams bought their house on Carlisle Avenue, they had to have white folks to go pretend that they were buying the house, and they bought the house for them, and they moved in. You know, that reminds me of a black lady getting a white couple to sit in their house when the appraisal come, and they got twice the value. That's right. So when the Colored Women's Democratic Club, which my mother and father were involved with, had events there, the white folks would come out and look to see these people, these black people coming with hats and gloves and whatever, having events, you know, at their homes. So let me get this right. The first blacks that moved into, and in Baltimore, for those that don't know, and I've said it multiple times, Baltimore is the home of segregation, going back to the 1910 ordinance under J. Barry Mahul, the father of segregation. He was the mayor. 2 black men, Ashby Hawkins and George McMecken, after which McMecken Street was named. They used to hang foot in his hind parts and stayed on him like white on rice because he was such a racist. But places like Roland Park had this ordinance created where not only could blacks not move into white neighborhoods, whites could not move into black neighborhoods. That's how diabolical these racists are. So when they go telling me about all these other people, know that it all started right here in Baltimore. Well, the other thing is, you know, the blacks, whites, they had where Kurt Smoke lived. What's that area called where he initially lived? And Pete Rollins. Sequoia, Ashburton. He had Ashburton. They had covenants in Ashburton that African Americans could not live in Ashburton for the longest period of time. Yeah, Frank Robinson almost left Baltimore. My understanding is because he couldn't find a place to live. And that's why I ain't no damn fan of the Orioles all the time. I'm 50-50 with it because I'm a Reggie Jackson fan. When the Orioles treated Reggie Jackson like doo-doo, then he go to New York and smack 3 home runs in one game. Yeah, the Orioles can go to hell in my book because I know who the racists are. My son and I were at that game when they won the World Series that night. You saw Mr. October? Yes, I did. Oh my God. Who was a good friend of my father's, got me tickets. This during the time I was living in New York, got me tickets, and we went to the
to the game at the Yankee Stadium, and we were there the night that Reggie Jackson hit the home run and won the World Series.
3 home runs. 3.
That's right. We were the night that he won.
What do you remember those home runs meaning for Black people?
You know, at the time, I really was just thinking about the Yankees. But it meant a lot that Reggie Jackson was able to be the hero and the star of that winning that World Series.
Why?
It was just like seeing Ketanji Brown Jackson being the first Black woman at the Supreme Court. It was almost as good. Well, his event was almost as good as hers.
I saw his event. I saw her event, and I ain't gonna belittle, because for me, he was telling the white racists, I don't care what you bring at me, we're gonna smack it out the park. It wasn't just a hit. It wasn't just a home run. He was making a statement.
Right. Well, let me just say this to you. You brought up something while we were talking. My dad I have some letters here that my dad wrote to Hofberger. And I think Hofberger was the one who was with the Orioles or with the baseball team. He was trying to get them to get Black players to come to Baltimore. He wrote one to the Orioles and one to the Colts.
That's my problem with the Orioles. Ain't got no damn Black people on it. Everybody, and I ain't no knocking my Dominican brothers. I'm saying Black people do play baseball. You better get something on the Baltimore Orioles if you want me to watch them. Al Bunbury, Ken Singleton, Lee May, African Americans.
Well, my dad had written some letters way back. I have copies of those letters.
Yeah, we got to go back to the Negro Leagues. We dropped the Negro Leagues to go fit in with their leagues. Now Black people ain't playing baseball at all. James Mosher, just down the street from where Senator Brailey was, baseball just died in the Black community.
Well, let me just say this. With Leon Day, my mother had gone to school with Leon Day and his sister. And so when Leon Day was inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, he died, but he lived long enough to know that he was going to be inducted, but he didn't live long enough to get inducted. And so I took a group of people up to the Baseball Hall of Fame to witness Leon Day's induction. And that was quite something, to be able to go through that Baseball Hall of Fame and see all the things of Jackie Robinson and all the other Black folks who were in the Baseball Hall of Fame. That was quite something.
And where's the Baseball Hall of Fame?
In Cooperstown, New York.
And you went to Cooperstown?
Went to Cooperstown. My father had passed away a few months earlier, and my father was a real baseball fan. Baseball and Joe Louis. And so the thing is, if he had been alive, he would have loved to have taken that trip.
Did he meet Joe Louis?
Yes, we met Joe Louis. And my aunt, I had a picture around here somewhere with my aunt that I had stayed with in New York, who was a friend of Joe Louis, and had a picture taken with the two of them.
Did you meet Thurgood Marshall?
No, I never met Thurgood Marshall. No, I didn't.
Who's the most famous person you ever met?
Me. Muhammad Ali. Oh, well, my dad was very active during the time that he was in office. He was a big supporter of President Jimmy Carter, who just celebrated his 90-something birthday.
Happy birthday, President Carter. He's a decent person.
Man.
Yes.
What happened was my father, Verda Welcome, Miss Oliver, who used to write for the Afro, and a couple other folks went down.
Miss Oliver, who that, Jakey Mama?
No, she had a daughter. Her daughter was in school with me. Oh, I'm trying to think of what her name is right now.
Okay.
But anyway, that wasn't Jakey's mother. Anyway, they all went down to Plains, Georgia when Carter was running for office. And I got a great big picture here of them down in Plains, Georgia. They met the wife and the mother and Miss Lil and the brother, everybody. And so while my father was there, he sent me a postcard saying I had just met the next president of the United States. I have that postcard here somewhere in my house. Anyway, What was the point I was trying to make? Oh, okay. He, of course, came to Baltimore. I have a picture of my dad, Sarbanes, a bunch of other folks, and Carter. Of Dwight Pettit, because Dwight Pettit was a big person with Carter. And when he was here, so I have a picture of them. And then when Carter got elected, I took off time from work, took my son out of school, and we came down to Washington to stay at my aunt's house to go to the inauguration. We were there for that whole week. And so we went to my mother and father came over, and we were at the inauguration. They had 5 different inaugural balls. And I remember my mother and us trying to go to all of them, exchanging shoes on one of the floors at one of the hotels for at the inaugural ball. All right, Jimmy Carter, of course, was a teetotaler, and so we had one of the balls was held at the train station in D.C., and he was serving peanut punch at the inauguration. Who was there but Muhammad Ali? Muhammad Ali was so popular that when he was trying to get out of the train station, they had to form a human wedge to put him in the middle of it to walk to get him out of the train station. During the time he was there, I was fortunate enough to be able to get his autograph. And I have his autograph on the back of one of the tickets that allowed you to get into the inauguration.
All right, Mr. Alice, we got to wind this down. What was great about Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali didn't take no you know what. He stood up for what he thought. He said he had not been shot. The Vietnams had not called him the N-word, and he was able to be redeemed by the things that he thought were correct.
What could celebrities of today learn from Muhammad Ali?
To be true to what you believe in and not knuckle in and just do things to be popular.
We didn't cover Harry Belafonte. We covered Dr. King, the movement.
Harry Belafonte, I said, oh my God, there was a march on Washington before the march, but there was another march on Washington, well, not a march on Washington, but a march to Washington when Eisenhower was the president. And my brother was selected. They were going to go up to talk with Eisenhower. My brother and another female were the 2 students that were selected to go up to meet with Eisenhower. Harry Belafonte was there. I met him, and he had just married the lady with the long braid. I'm trying to remember what her name is now, but we got to meet them at that march. And of course, Eisenhower refused to meet with my brother and the young lady who were selected to go to meet with him. But so they had prayer and they came back. That was another march before the 1963 March on Washington. We did meet Harry Belafonte at that as well. When you say something, it brings more information back to me, and I start remembering things and what happened.
What could the entertainers of today learn from Harry Belafonte?
Also, to be true to what they are about. I am just so delighted that Harry is still alive and still being involved. One of the things that we have to look forward to is that Oprah Winfrey has just produced a film about Sidney Poitier. And I've been reading about that. That's going to be released shortly. And the things that he had to go through as being in us and working in the segregated movies and what have you. And Harry Belafonte and Sidney Poitier were very, very good friends. And so they were involved in the civil rights movement together.
Before we close this segment out, I want to thank you. And some of the comments that people have shared is, where's your damn book? But I'm gonna get to this. And hello from Ruth Kirk's daughter, Karen. She says she enjoyed listening to your history, Miss Alice. That's Karen Kirk Obayanju. That's Ruth Kirk's daughter. Let me. I need a quote from you. One of your favorite quotes.
My favorite quote is, "To thine own self be true."
Well, that's resounded throughout this interview. And I want to let you know also, Nina from Moreland Avenue, that's my classmate and my neighbor from Matthew Henson. She says, thank you, Miss Alice. Also, my neighbor from Moreland Avenue, my homeboy, Chucky, Charles Raleigh. You say Grand Rising. Moreland Avenue, all up in this house. What did that? Oh, on the screen, you can't see this, but I have a picture of you, and in that picture is your girlfriend, Barbara Robinson.
Okay.
So I just want you to know the visual. I'm in the middle of both of y'all.
All right.
Ms. Alice, we thank you so much. We want you to take care of yourself. We thank you for sharing this history. To thine own self be true. You heard it from the boss lady. Any final thought before we go?
Oh, I just want to say to Miss Ruth Kirk's daughter that her crab cakes were legendary. Everybody talked, Tom Saunders and everybody talked about your mother's crab cakes. It's been a pleasure being on with Mr. Glover, and I just love what you're doing, and continue doing what you're doing, and I'm just happy to be of help in any way that I can possibly be of help.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
We love you,
for
Miss
having
Alice.
me.
Yes, ma'am.
Love you too. Have a wonderful day.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Bye-bye.
Blessed be the name of the Lord. That lady gonna try to bring me some tears in my eyes. It ain't gonna happen. Thank you very much. Have a beautiful day. My name's Donnie Glover. Hug somebody, love somebody, put some bleach on the steps. Share this history with our young people. May we hold it dear in our hearts. I learned so much. And thank God for Senator Troy Brailey, a real public servant, kind, accessible, humble guy. Humble. His daddy wanted him to be a farmer. Great day, Chucky. His daddy wanted him to be a farmer. He left South Carolina, came to Baltimore. Thank you, Karen. I am the only one who can make it just like her. Well, I'd have to sample it. I don't believe you. Do you use Dijon mustard or yellow mustard? Donnie Glover out. Love you. Thank you for the opportunity.